Wonderful. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Yasmin Forbes, and I am one of two curriculum specialists with the National Council for History Education, or NCHE. This panel webinar is about navigating tough conversations, guiding young learners through the election season. And to just give you a little context about what you're here today, we are framing it around it's a year of heightened political tension, and students in elementary and middle schools are likely to have questions about the ongoing election. These discussions can be challenging for educators, especially when topics are controversial or emotionally charged. This webinar brings together a panel of two experienced educators to provide strategies for fostering constructive, age-appropriate conversations. We'll explore how to create a supportive environment where students can express their thoughts, ask questions, and learn the value of respectful discourse. Join us to gain tools and insights to, learn how to guide these young minds through these topics. So before we jump in, I want to introduce our lovely panelists. We have Angela Bianco, and we also have Latanda Mitchell. And I'm going to start off with Angela. So Angela is an elementary educator and lifelong learner with a passion for social emotional learning, differentiation, and social studies. With over a decade of experience in the IB PYP framework, she is dedicated to fostering inclusive, sustainable, and affirming environments for all learners. In 2019, Angela was honored as Minnesota's Social Studies Teacher of the Year and served as a teacher in residence for the Inquiry in the Upper Midwest Project, where she developed primary source sets for classroom use. She also played a key role in securing funding for an outdoor classroom at her school and has created engaging lessons to encourage students to explore the outdoors. As a part of the equity team, Angela helped lead professional development for teachers and staff to help develop a culture of equity and inclusion in the building and across the district. And then Latanda Mitchell is an elementary social studies curriculum specialist at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. With over 12 years of experience, she specializes in developing innovative and culturally responsive curricula for urban education environments, with a focus on elementary social studies. Latanda is dedicated to ensuring equitable access to high quality education by diverse student populations. She holds a bachelor's degree in elementary education and a master's degree in education, and is currently pursuing a PhD in curriculum and instruction with a concentration in urban education. This summer, Latanda led a statewide project to provide civic literacy lessons and resources to teachers across North Carolina in partnership with Generation Nation in Guilford County. She is also collaborating with Generation Nation during the voting season to equip teachers with mini voting kits, lessons, and resources aimed at fostering civic engagement in the community. All right, so thank you, ladies, for joining us this evening, and thank you to those who are joining us live for this panel webinar. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with my first question, and either one of you can jump in to answer, and we'll then toss it to the other person if they have anything that they would like to add. So to start, how do you approach introducing the topic of elections to your students or former students?
As I was thinking about this, I mean, I think we're really talking about elections and talking about government and discourse day one, right? Like they come in the classroom, the way we talk to to learners and how we encourage them to talk to each other really, I think, sets that tone for how they're going to engage in that election talk. So I think it that the literal election talk in a special year like this, or even I think of like when schools are passing levies, um, it really has already started with our time together. And I mean, often they're going to bring in something that they hear as ads get to be on more, and commercials are saying things that I think it definitely starts to ramp up as we get closer. But I think it really starts like day one as far as like creating that culture. But little bit by little, I think it also gets into our classroom through like, our current events, especially in the elementary classroom, just a little different, where we're reading about different issues and how they show up in our day-to-day lives. But I think really we're kind of day one, and as they bring it up, I mean, they could bring it up day one, and you're kind of just trying to be ready for it when they say something. But LaTonda, do you have thoughts?
I'm going to veggie off of what Angela said is at the beginning. It starts at the beginning, how you just set the tone and the environment. So recently we've been giving out books to like create classroom constitutions. So, like, just right from the start, you have an opinion, you have a voice, you matter in these classrooms. Like, we want the students to feel like they belong, and creates that safe space because when you are teaching kids about voting, they need to feel safe because everybody's coming with their own background knowledge, what they're hearing at home. But it's huge to just create that space first. And yeah, like Angela said, it's at the beginning of the year, and always staying nonpartisan, always coming and making sure they're thinking about all sides of any issue that they bring up. Younger kids, we talk more about um, choosing something in the school versus, your older kids where you're like bringing up through current events that are still nonpartisan.
Yeah, no, I think both of you, mentioned something that is really important, is that it's not always framed just around, okay, we're in an actual national election season, so now I need to go hard with all this election talk. It's no, from the beginning, we're going to grow that environment of trust, right? And then we're going to be able to build to have conversations around, things that are important to them. So like you said, even in their school, okay, cool. Do you want to, pizza Friday? Okay, well, how would you argue that, and how would you go about wanting that to be enacted into the school? And so it can start kind of at those things that are directly impacting them, but also knowing that during times where there are those active elections, that there might be some of those like additional, you know, conversations that pop up because they're going to be there in that moment of like, hey, I was, in the living room with my dad yesterday and this came on, like, what's going on? And if you did create that trusting environment, they probably are coming to you and be like, hey, Miss Mitchell, and, hey, Miss Bianco, like, like I, as someone I trust, like, what is all this about? Like, what's going on? Right. So those things definitely can happen, and they should happen naturally and organically. So, and I think some people just try to automatically start, okay, only during this time frame, I'm gonna go really hard with this. So I love that you both believe in creating those environments of safety and comfort and trust for your students from the beginning. Wonderful. And so, Latanda, I will say you stole my thunder a little bit because that was my next question for both of you. So, do you believe that it's truly possible to remain nonpartisan and or unbiased when having dialogues around elections? Why or why not? And then I'm going to add another little caveat there. In addition to the why or why not, then if you do, how are you ensuring that that happens? And if not, why is that the case?
So, one thing that I'm going to start off by saying, it's really hard to not bring your own thinking, your own background knowledge, your own opinions into any discussion you have with your students. Um, but one thing that I try to do, especially when I was in a classroom, and I can tell you in the classroom and what I've done now to kind of help teachers, in the classroom, I would write down my own thinking and then what somebody could say beyond that, or on the other side, what I believe that they could say. And then I would think, these are the things that I'm going to get it out right now so that I don't say it with the students. Because I need to check my own biases at the door and know that I'm not trying to push my own opinion on my students. It's not that I want them to think like me. I want them to come to their own conclusion through any text that we read. First, it escapes me right now. But like I want them to come up with their own evidence on why you have that thinking. So I try to like check my own self, and I'm always reflecting. For our teachers, what I've created this year, and it's hard to really manage people because people go in with their own things. Um, what I've done is created a do and do not list. Um, and one of the things is anytime you feel like you want to kind of like jump in and say, like, defend something that somebody's saying, you say it in your head and you go, not my place. And I like videoed it for them to say, not my place to do that. You're just trying to give them all the um, information to form their own opinions because we want them to be um, deep thinkers on their own. I don't want you to have my opinion. I don't want you to have your parents' opinion, but I'm also not here to impose whatever I have going on or what our school thinks or any other student they're thinking upon you. Um, and if it doesn't happen and we have issues, I'm always like, okay, well, let's table this conversation because I think that maybe we need to think about a different route. That's what I did in the classroom. Sometimes you have to just stop the conversation because it's just it's not beneficial for anybody. And then it's almost like you're not changing someone's mind by trying to argue with them. Let it go. Sometimes you just have to step back, everybody take a breather and reflect. That's yeah. I hope I answered every part of that, but I think I
You did. I threw a lot of things at you, but it's because it's a very complex idea. But
yes, it
so
is.
you definitely answered it for sure. Angela, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I would just second everything that Latanda said. That idea of like going back to the, like they say, remember your why, but like you're thinking about like, what's my goal? Like my goal is to really cultivate a culture of thinking and reflection. Um, and I do think it does require us to be self-aware and regulated. Like a dysregulated adult cannot help a dysregulated child. So like thinking about how you're going into those conversations and like checking and like maybe this is not the time. And there's been times where I've said, I love that you're asking these questions. We're going to talk about this a little bit later today, just because either I need to have some time to prep and prepare, or I can just the read in our classroom space is that this doesn't feel like it's going to go there. It's going to get more contentious. And like a lot of these conversations happened around our like morning meetings time or circle. And so it was a lot of like, we're not here to argue with each other. Like that's actually not what we're doing. We're here to discuss. And like, we talk about like, what is the difference? Like we're not trying to win anything. And I think, that's tricky for an 8, 9, 10-year-old. But like, I think once you practice that with a lot of different things, that does help. But yeah, I would just second everything. Like you've got to just kind of regulate, but I love the idea of creating for staff, like do's and don'ts and making sure that we're like, okay, well, what happens when you get to a point where maybe somebody says something or asks you point blank? I've had kids ask point blank, like, who are you going to vote for? And I said, oh, that's just not as interesting as what you're thinking about. So you come up with, I think, little ways to like answer that ahead of time so you're not caught on the fly.
Yeah, no, I think you guys both hit on something that's really important is just that as an educator, you should be wanting your students to just be critical thinkers, right? To investigate, to not just, take necessarily what they're told, even necessarily from you, right? Like I think some teachers are always afraid to be like fact checked or to not know all the things, right? And so sometimes a student will ask something and the teacher just will just give this, response, and it's not something that's well constructed or thought out because they just want to be able to say they have the answer. And sometimes it's okay to not have the answer or not have it right away, or to take that time to formulate how you want to respond and to let them know, like, hey, like you said, that's great, it's wonderful. I will get back to you, and really do get back to them. But, take that time to be intentional about the conversation you're going to have with them, especially if it is something that's very direct. And then, some of those questions are happening, like you said, at a circle time. And then all the other kids are looking at you like, huh, yeah, actually, that's a great question, Johnny. Thank you for that. Like, yeah, what do you think? So I think it's important to just take those steps back where you need to. And then, also setting some of those parameters for yourself, having some of those responses, like you mentioned, Latanda, like, hey, okay, well, this could happen. So, how could I maybe respond to this? And so starting to think about it as well. So it doesn't just take you by surprise. But I do think it's important to push against that narrative that teachers are in the classroom to indoctrinate or to push their agendas or whatever they want to frame it as, but that all you're doing is, hey, you are your own person, and I want you to be able to take all of this information in and come to your own conclusions. That's all I'm here to guide you. I'm here to facilitate that type of understanding and learning for you. So I think that's wonderful. And to go to my next question, so sometimes those students, they do have things that just come out and blurt out and they say the things. So how do you encourage respectful dialogue among students with differing viewpoints? So it's not them, scrapping on the carpet in the morning. And I know it might differ from middle school to elementary too. So I don't know if there's like a different way. I taught high school, and so I'm like that frame and that mind of thinking of how I would approach those types of viewpoints that differ. But
I think I've done both. Middle and elementary school are very different.
Mm.
It's a lot of coaching.
Yeah.
It's a lot of coaching, and it's a lot of going back and saying, what did we do right? It's a lot of reflecting. And they're not going to be perfect the first time. No matter if they've done it in the past, if the teacher before that was like, oh, I did all of these Socratic seminars, it doesn't matter if they're in a different environment. They are with a new teacher. They are older, so their thinking is a little more advanced. So I think it's a lot of practice. It's a little more practice with the youngers than it is with your older students. But I at the beginning of the year, I really, really, I don't want to use the word enforce, but enforce is the word that I have right now. I enforce this rule of you have to be respectful of everybody's opinion. Things are just not always going to wrap up in a bow and just be finished. You have to just be okay with reflecting on and coming back to a discussion. And if you feel that it's going to a place where you're not in control, step away. And sometimes you have to, tap them on the shoulder. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close this conversation. Go ahead, just step out for a second. Because sometimes, like Angel, you hit it on the head. You have to read the room. So in order to help them, because they don't always know how to regulate their emotions, just as adults don't know how to do that either. It's really like helping them see this is not going in a constructive way. And we're not being respectful. And sometimes you have to pull the whole class back. Wait a minute. I don't think that I like the way that we're talking to each other. And you have to just be honest with them. And hitting on that, I think we're going into a territory that we don't know the answer. So maybe we need to do some other research before we start making claims. A lot of that is just making sure if you're going to speak on facts. We're trying not to speak out of emotion. And when it does get heated, we have to stop and go back and say, whoa, let's take a break. A lot of breaks in lower elementary school. We have discussions like, what type of ice cream are we going to have at the party? I wanted chocolate. Susie wanted strawberry. We're not going to fight over that. Let's come to a compromise. Let's come to an agreement that maybe you like it, it's just not good for everybody. Let's go to everybody's opinion. But older kids, sometimes I let the chaos roam a little bit to see if they can bring it back, and if I have to step in as a facilitator or a coach, I then step in because I do want them to learn how to have that discourse without me having to go in and say, "Oh, well, you guys, you're off topic. You're not there," or anything like that. Somebody always, once they've learned the steps, somebody always brings it back. Well, wait, we're not answering the question. And then sometimes I drop little hints like, this seems good. Let me give you this little tidbit here. I just like to stir the pot a little bit to get that, that rich conversation. But yeah, a lot of stepping away, pausing, giving them time to reflect, because I have had heated conversations in classrooms where your students are upset and it's like, you got to back away. You cannot take this personal. This is not to harm you. This is just somebody else's opinion. And it's not something that you have to wear on your shoulders. But let's step away. Let's come back to this in a couple of days, because obviously this is a really hot topic. And the topics that are hot to them are not the ones that are hot to us.
Yeah, worried about that. Like you would be surprised, I think. Yeah, the thing that gets them riled. Um, I think Latanda really laid out the scaffolding. Like you're so heavily like facilitating in elementary, and then a little bit of that is a little like more hands off, right? Like I'm going to see where it goes. Can't We're hoping their regulation skills are a little bit better, that they feel like I can step away. Where in elementary and fourth grade, I mean, we would have a conversation and it's like, okay, we're going to stop and we're all going to do some box breathing and then we're going to try again. And like you might do that 2 or 3 times and then kind of come to a stopping spot. So I think just you're facilitating, you're kind of like the reins are a little bit more, I think, in elementary, and you're kind of loosening up as you get older. It makes sense. But also I help give them language. Like, when Latanda said coaching, 100%, like when they're saying things like fact, I'll often go back to I think or I believe. Okay, I want you to repeat. I think. Yep. Okay. And so like you might have to do that to every kid just because it's, again, they're just getting used to the language. And so I think giving them a language, and then also giving them language to disagree. I disagree with that because, and you still are, but it is like no matter how many circles, it could be in, the first week of June, and you're like, we've done this so many times, but I mean, it's like really stick with it, because I think you're really trying to plant the seeds and hopefully like, let go of the training wheels as they get older. But yeah, just giving them a lot of language and then just being really patient and going there. I think, it'd be really easy sometimes to just shut it down. And it's like, that's just not the tools we want to teach them. We want them to be resilient. That's how they get to be thinkers. And, and hopefully in middle school you're like, oh, I know this, like the student is stepping in to help put it back together. And that's great. And you're hoping for those moments. But I know at elementary, sometimes it's like, we just don't always see that. And we're just really hoping that we're cultivating that in them. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that, you're doing that prep work of how they can have conversations with individuals they won't agree with, and they're going to always experience that, right? Though right now it might be over ice cream flavors, but then when they're adults, it might be over some like really serious things, and they have to be able to, from a young age, start learning how to engage and interact with people who might have some very differing opinions from them, and to not just resort to kind of an all-out argument, rather it being a constructive conversation. And if it cannot be, then to know when to step away. And so I think it's very key and important to have that and start establishing that in that time frame when they're younger, in the elementary years, so that as they get to middle school, as they get to high school, those reins could be, loosened, and hopefully even maybe they step in, right? Maybe they see their peers kind of going off the deep end and like, hey guys, like actually, and they help to even maybe regulate. And you're just like, wow, they really learn, they learn today, right? And you see it in real time happening. So, and I think that's great. So it's important that those conversations are not avoided and those skills are not avoided, even if students are elementary. Because I think a lot of times people are under the impression that because a child is younger, that they cannot learn particular social skills or that it's something that should be avoided until they get to a certain age, when that's not true because they see everything going on around them and they hear everything going on around them. They're taking everything in like a sponge, and to not allow them a space to grapple with some of these things that they're hearing or feeling, and trying to figure out how to help them regulate all of that, is definitely a disservice. So I think it's amazing that you all in your classroom spaces, or if you're coaching other teachers, that you're, giving that guidance of, hey, like you should be allowing that to happen in your classroom. So wonderful. To go to my next question, kind of on that lane of sometimes there might be some things that you have to really tackle in the moment, and how do you do that? And so how would you address sensitive issues that might arise, that might come from maybe negative campaign ads or misinformation or controversial topics that are maybe directly related to an election?
I think it's important to like think about the different ways that learners can process. So maybe, especially with something you're like, whoa, like, this is more heated. Um, Being like, okay, I'm just going to take a beat for people to share what they're thinking and journaling, and then it gives you an idea to like, you get a chance to read it. Obviously, they have to be able to write to do that, but sometimes even like courageous conversations has a compass, and there's thinking, feeling, doing, and believing. And so sometimes we'll have like a conversation, and I'll give them a post-it note and say, maybe put where you are on that. Or it could be, I mean, you can even do that virtually if you want it to be more anonymous. But I think giving, again, like you had said, like you don't always have to just jump in, right? It's like you can always take a beat and say, I hear this is on your mind. We're going to take some time to think about it. I'm going to honor that. And then we're going to come back to it. I think that helps. Thank you for putting that in the chat. And I know that there's an elementary teacher who has also made a more kid-friendly version. And there's like examples, but I think just having other ways to process that you can address it and be in the moment, but also like give another way to think about it. And then kind of like Latanda said, just to go back to that, those ideas of like, in this space, we're going to be respectful and we're going to talk respectfully to each other. That's non-negotiable. And so, yeah, I mean, you're still addressing the safety, I think, of the community, and the issue without having to talk about it right at that moment in a discussion format. And I guess that's kind of what comes to my mind.
And again, I'm gonna say, yeah, I agree with Angela and say, yeah, taking a beat and going off of something you said earlier and saying, I just don't know. I don't have the answer to that. Or saying, I think this is a topic that maybe you need to discuss at home with your parents. So that it's that gray area that we're kind of stuck in right now of like, what can you say? What can you not say? Is anybody taking this and like I'm indoctrinating them into whatever schools are doing of learning, but or like anything. So like sometimes you have to step back and say, that's that quick thinking in your mind, it seems like it's in slow motion. You're like your little people up there going, should I answer this? Should I not? Where could this go? Where could this lead? Is this like going to the principal's office, going to like upper? Yeah, or should I like reach out to somebody? So like I always, because I'm in the district office level, what I tell teachers is, like you can come to me with any of your issues. If you're having an issue with something that's going on in class and you just don't know, come to me and I'll like give you the language to say that would keep you safe. because I think that's what a lot of teachers are feeling right now, especially in this moment. They're not feeling safe. So I don't even want to bring it up because I don't feel safe at all. So I think being in the classroom, sometimes you need to be able to reach out to people to say, this question came up. Can I address this in the classroom? Does this fit with our standards? So that you have something to kind of fall back on to say, well, I got this was approved from my district to say this. And it's really sad that we've gotten to that point, but we always have to think about, we don't know. Kids say whatever when they go home, and they don't mean harm, but the interpretation that that parent feels or takes on can turn into something totally different. Well, we learned about we're going to vote for president and president in our classroom. A parent can take that and run with it, that we're doing whatever. But if you get the right language, it could help. But really stepping back and saying, I don't know, or let's talk to your parents, or let me find out the answer later from somebody else. Um, in a culture of people being canceled and teachers being canceled, um, and we just have to be safe to say, or feel safe enough to say, I just don't know, even though that feels like we're losing some type of control. Um, I know what that feels like to say, I don't know, because you're supposed to be the person to know the information, but also being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know in that moment. Let's table that. Let me find out the answer. And if I don't know, I'm still going to tell you, I don't know. I didn't find it out. Maybe you can go home and look that up with your parents. Which is, yeah, put it back on them. not on us.
Going just like what you said reminded me of sometimes when we've had that idea of sometimes they go home and you're like, whoa, that's not at all what we talked about. Unexpected. Sometimes if we've had a more heated conversation, it depends on the culture of your school, on your district. I'll preemptively send my own communication to say, hey, lots of students had questions about different things, these topics today. And I gave students a chance to process them in writing, and they might have some questions at home. And I just feel like what that helps me do is, somebody brought it in and we talked about it because, we're a community. That's what school, if somebody said something on the bus, there's no way we're not going to be able to talk about it. So I think depending on, again, the culture of your school and your district and who you feel has your back, that can be helpful to be just be ahead of some of that communication, because sometimes I feel like that has been the times where I have been most unexpected, where it's we had a very different view of how that conversation was. And it might have gone differently if your family would have had an idea of, oh, okay, maybe we need to have a conversation at home about this. So that may or may not be helpful, but that's helped me in the past.
Yeah, no, I think that is important to protect yourselves as educators, but to also make sure that you're still providing that space for your students. And so then if you do have to do some of that extra legwork of, like you're saying, Angela, hey, these conversations started happening. So just to kind of get in front of it so that there's all these different narratives going around, and then now parents are trying to figure out what happened, but you're saying, hey, this is what occurred. There was a lot of feelings, there was a lot of thoughts, there were a lot of opinions, just to let them know that up front, before things could be maybe more misconstrued, if you will. And then also just ensuring that when you are having these conversations, that you don't feel, while protecting yourself, that you don't feel like you can not answer what the student is asking you, or feel like you can provide them some type of even solace, if you will. Because I know when I was in the classroom, and I'm sure it's still happening right now, but a big topic for the students that they were always concerned about, no matter what was going on party wise, they were always concerned about immigration. And for some of them, what that might mean for them and their status and their family status, and just knowing that there was a lot of stress that would come from that, and not knowing what's going to happen, and being, even as a high schooler, them having those concerns. But I can only imagine being an elementary age child and not really knowing what's going on and being kind of insecure around that. And then them coming to school, having you being those trusted people, and they might come to you with some of those, feelings or concerns. And so, like, how are you navigating those types of conversations amid and conversations that could maybe be shelved and tabled that don't directly impact that student's day-to-day or daily life, if you will. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of kind of leading with, like, it's a question within a statement, if you will. But yeah, like, how are you providing that type of safe space for students, that some of these things that might be in discussion that directly might impact them, while also respecting the space for their peers as well?
I think it goes back to, I think what we said at, like, when we first started, it's creating a non-negotiable. We are respecting everybody in here. And you kind of see that as they get older that they do have those opinions, and they're bringing information from home and things like that. I mean, you have to address it. Sometimes you just have to address it in the classroom, and stop and say, we're not going to talk about other groups of people like that. We're also not going to use language that makes others feel inferior. We're not doing that. So if you can't say anything respectful, and if I need to help coach you through what words you can use to form your opinion, but if we can't do that, then you need to sit out this conversation. And I never want to silence a child's voice, but when you are harming other people in the classroom, we're not in here with any type of speech that is going to make anybody feel bad. And I say that because some people can feel offended, but it's at it's when, like, if they're saying something that is offensive, I'm going to address it. When it's a statement that then makes somebody on the backside feel bad or guilty for something that's happened, I always say, do not take this personal. Every time we start a conversation, do not take anything personal. People are, and that's hard for younger students to believe that, to not take it personal or to look at that person different. They're Sometimes people are just misinformed. Maybe you need to give them a different opinion. Maybe they need to hear your side. But creating the safe space in your classroom is most important. And anytime it happens and you read the room that other people feel uncomfortable, you have to address it. Um, what is it? It's calling in and calling out, or reaching out. No, calling in, calling out. Sometimes you just gotta call people out because you have to stop it so that other people feel safe. And then sometimes you have to take them aside and say, I've noticed you've been saying a couple of things in the room. Let's talk through some things. We're going to have a discussion today about so and so. Let's talk through what you're thinking, and maybe I can give you some other language that's not going to come off offensive. Because maybe you're leading with emotion, and your emotion is clouding your argument that you're trying to make, because you are making a great argument, but your emotion and the words you're using is making others in the classroom feel very uncomfortable. Um, and of course, you don't say it exactly like that with the younger kids, but with your older kids, you have to say it because they're the ones that can understand a little bit more of those commercials or like the environment that's going on. And you have to stop it at the door. You have to stop it, because then your whole building at the beginning of the year has crumbled in that one conversation. Nobody feels safe anymore because you let it continue to happen because you are afraid to step up. Sometimes you just kind of gotta put that fear to the side and say, we are not talking to people like that in our classroom. Let's all stop. some language that we can use to address other groups of people is this, and this, or here are some words or phrases we can use to address this situation. We will not talk like that in the classroom the next time that happens. I'm going to have to send you out. We're going to have a talk, and maybe let's have a talk with your parents too. And again, what Angela said, if that happens, you might as well just send a note to all the parents, especially to the parent of the student that you had to call out, because they will feel offended. Even though you don't want to offend nobody, they're going to feel offended. Most definitely.
I really like, I think it's so beautiful how Latanda said, like, there's a coaching of skill too, right? Like, I see you're passionate. I see you've got ideas, right? There's a skill you're missing. And like, I'm going to provide that. That's what I'm here for, right? I'm here to teach you, here to kind of guide you through the language. And we've talked about like some of the language is dehumanizing language. And we talk like, what does it mean when we say words like that? Like we take away somebody's humanity and like sit with that. Like we are here to be in community with each other and learn with each other, learn from each other. And those things like really stop our learning and really stop our safety. And so I think, again, like, yeah, you really do put on the brakes. It's like, oh, that's not something we do here. I think of a conversation about we had read something about people experiencing homelessness, and I knew that there was a kid who was experiencing homelessness and was living with a family member. And the way that they were talking about it, I had to like give some empathy, but also not. I didn't want to bring extra attention to that student. So we talked about like in each situation trying to pull out the empathy and humanity. Like, do you think that this is somebody lives like this? Do you think that this is somebody's everyday? And getting them to that point, because I think sometimes, especially younger learners, just like you're so in your head, your world, who you are, right? It's just you're growing that capacity for outside thinking. And so just to think about that, I mean, that's the beauty of like, I think read alouds and all of those stories that we do, mirrors and windows, to say like, that those things are not, these are not just things we're talking about. Like these are actual realities. And so we did get to a point where like, we could talk about people who were experiencing homelessness with more humanity, and that student like felt comfortable even like sharing. And so I was like, okay, I think, hopefully we've gotten to a better place that somebody even feels comfortable sharing their story. But yeah, like that language of, I think finding a way to like put the brakes on and let them know like this, the way that we're talking to each other, the way we're talking about people is not the way we're going to do it here. And hopefully not the way you do it outside of our building. But there's something different about what you've said that now has created, it's now making this unsafe. And I think they do get that it's, it's something that it may not be like physical safety every time, but there's an emotional safety in that cancels. Just like Latana said, it like will take out your whole system if you just let those things slide, because people then don't trust you, and that is key.
Yeah, and I think that just providing students, like you guys mentioned, just with better language to be more empathetic to their peers, regardless if they're experiencing something or if they identify a certain way or do not, whatever that may be, just knowing that this world, kind of this global world, if you will, like has so many different types of people that have so many different types of lived experiences, and that's going to be negative experiences that have impacted them because of their identities. And with that, understanding that while you may not be experiencing that, and maybe you don't even understand it, wanting to be able to understand, and to empathize with that particular person, and just to figure out kind of where they're coming from. And I think what makes that harder sometimes is not only sometimes are we getting the information from their surroundings, like, their family or like their immediate peers, but the internet, right? Like everything is like at a grab. They could just, click on anything. I mean, they could be playing Roblox or something, and then all of a sudden something pops up, right? We're just watching a YouTube video. They're, watching a cartoon or something, and then boom, there's that information. And so them just always having access to this information, and then what to do with all of that access, right? And like how to guide them through as they're taking in all of this. Like, how do you then regulate that so that it doesn't just spew out, because maybe they're even parroting something that they've heard, right? They might even know what it means or even believe it, but they're parroting it, right? And they're saying, okay, oh, I heard people saying this, so this must be true. This must be, fact, right? And so like how to guide them back. And I think, it does come back to what you guys are mentioning, of just like going back to the safe space, and making sure that if there is something that goes like out of turn, that you are directly finding a way to tackle that in the moment, so that it doesn't break, that trust that's being built, because that could really shatter, a student if they're like, oh, I thought, and then now, oh, and then they feel kind of like an outsider, or like they can't, share things anymore, right? So I think that that's important, that regardless if you're in the classroom or if you're coaching teachers, that really sometimes you just have to say the things and shut the things down if it does get to that level. So I appreciate those responses. A question I had is kind of about guiding teachers who are in some of those states that might not be, as friendly when it comes to having certain conversations. I know that North Carolina is not necessarily innocent, but it's not the worst. And I know, Angela, you're in Minnesota, and I'm assuming that it's not that bad, at least from what I've seen, that, it's not some of the Floridas and the Texas, if you will. So I'm just wondering, what kind of advice would you give to teachers who are in some of those environments that maybe even their district is not even helping them, guiding them, giving them those tools, those do's and don'ts, right? And they're just kind of floating out there and just hoping they don't say the wrong thing and lose their job and, their livelihood. And so, yeah, you guys would speak to that.
Well, what I did this year, and I did it early, is I provided a kind of voting memo for all teachers, all principals, to give to teachers inside of these schools, to just say, here are resources that you can use that have been vetted, that are safe, that I will back you up on and say, yes, this goes along with what we are teaching. We're trying to raise citizens. We're trying to raise, somebody said in the chat, independent thinkers. We're trying to create well-rounded students. We're trying to give them the knowledge, but not shape it in a way that they can only think one way. I want you to think whatever way you want to think, because I am not you, you are not me. But really providing resources, lessons. I'm going to say that part last. Do's and don'ts, what to do in the classroom, what not to do in the classroom. Again, biggest thing we really push on is just being nonpartisan, and it's hard, but it's necessary, especially right now. Last year, you still need to be nonpartisan, but right now needs to be really huge, because being in North Carolina, we are a what they call a battleground state. We could go either way. And Charlotte sits in a very unique area where some of the surrounding counties are on both sides. So I'm just trying to give information out where teachers will feel like, yes, I have something that I can use, and I can teach students to be civic leaders without thinking I only have to vote on president. So one thing that I'm encouraging teachers to do, yes, we're giving many voting kits, but you're voting on the student advisory person. Let's think about, we're so, what is the word? We're so over excited about this presidential election. But there are things on our level, our state level, our local level, that really affect our everyday lives. So that is really important, but showing them that it's not just about voting for president, because that's every 4 years. We're voting on, your roads. We're voting on, students going to the superintendent and speaking for your rights to give an ear or something that has to do with you. And our elementary kids, like their votes don't truly count towards the student advisory. But we want them to know that once you get older and you start voting for these people, and they do hold that election for somebody who's representing you on the board, your vote matters. We're trying to create civic leaders. We don't want kids to just not do it because we're afraid of what parents will say. I'll give you the tools. Now, if you go off script and you do something else, I don't know. I don't know about that. But I want to provide something because I know how this election can really scare teachers into just not doing it at all. And luckily, in our lower elementary levels, civics and government was their first unit. So, I mean, you had to teach it. You had no reason not to teach it because you're teaching the standards. You're not indoctrinating, you're teaching facts. You're not indoctrinating. You're not just talking about the president. You're teaching facts. How does the government run? But I am giving you voting things because these students need to know that voting matters. But yeah.
I mean, I think you said there with you know your standards well, what you are required, like by law, right? That will definitely be helpful. I think know who's in your court, know who's got your back. Like, find the Latondas in your district. Like, can we, or ask for it? Can we get some guidance on some election talk? How to, how to talk about these things in the classroom and be safe. So I would, yes, think about who your network is, like your supporters, your social studies liaisons, but also like know your standards really well to say that, it is a legal document and I'm teaching the legal document. I think the Florida teachers taught me that well, that you're always going back, every book, everything that you're doing, you're going to the standards, just because that's the thing that it's harder to argue with that.
Wow. No, I really think those responses are helpful because you can't debate what's in the standards because that's what the state is saying that you're supposed to be doing. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And if you could always tie it back, do that. For me personally, mine was always really hyper fixating to on like the document itself. Like you were mentioning, Angela, like this is the document, I'm teaching the document. This is what it says. And what I would refer to as historical receipts, if you will. It's like this actually happened. This is a thing. It existed, and so it actually cannot be refuted. So that's how I would lead with that as well. And yeah, definitely find those networks. Make sure that you're, rallying with those who are going to keep each other safe. Because at the end of the day, we have each other's backs as educators, and we really need to rally together to support one another even if you're not getting that support maybe from some of these district levels, like what can we do in our local space and in the school, in this team to make sure everybody feels as comfortable and as confident as possible. So, yeah. Well, my questions are done, but I did want to see if the live attendees had any questions before I close out, but I really appreciated you guys answering my questions. Hopefully it was helpful to everyone here. I do see one about, is it possible to get a sample email? Or like, I guess I know if there's like a templated, email that you've sent out before about how to have these conversations or something like that. If you have it, if it exists.
I can send, I mean, are you talking about, the email to families or the do's and don'ts that Latonda is sharing with her staff?
Really should. Juliet asked, so is it possible to get a sample email? So I'm assuming either or would probably be helpful. There's a do's and don'ts or just like, yeah, both. There we go. Both. Wonderful. Another, I think both. So yeah, how can you like pay to the families, this is what's going on or what happened? Kind of framing that and also like a do's and don'ts as well. Any other questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat or in the Q&A box, and I can snag them. And while we're waiting to see if anybody else has any questions they want to pose, I do want to say that it is important, kind of what you guys were both emphasizing throughout this entire dialogue, was growing civic leaders, learners, people who are going to be active in their communities, right, at these local levels, and not just, you know, from that national capacity of voting for our president, but like, hey, like school boards, and like as they get older, like what are these you know, what are these voting opportunities that really are going to impact your life at every different level, and how can you get involved in your community at all levels. So I appreciate that. Yes, school board elections are very important. They're extremely important. I think people forget about them sometimes, you know? So I'm just like, so, no, okay. So important, so important.
I like work in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, but I live in a different county, so I don't get to vote on those.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely do my research because my children will go to like this school system. So like, oh my God, school board elections are so important because they really make or set the tone for schools.
Mhm.
So put
Maybe
that
there's
out there
some
that
activity. I don't know about elementary kids, but maybe middle school kids, like, hey, these are the people running for the local school board. How you feeling about these bios? Or I don't know.
yes. How are you feeling? Do they represent what you think you would
Yeah.
represent? You know, just asking those questions.
Yeah.
We
Issues you
think,
see in your community, in your schools, are they,
yeah,
is anyone going to fix that? Or they have a plan? Or, you know, is that what they're running on? Yeah, for sure. Get them involved, the students, for sure. Yeah, send the students to the school board meetings.
our in White Bear, where I taught, they had a high schooler on the school board. I think then that really helped, but also for younger learners, like thinking of like, this is your teacher's boss's boss's boss, and it's like you have a role, and like that feels really powerful. Like you can know those bosses, the boss of the big boss. And so like I think just that, like, oh wow, like we can know who they are, we can talk to them, we can see them out in the community. That feels like a big deal.
For sure. Okay. Cool. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and close out. Thank you again, Angela, Latanda. This has been really amazing. I appreciate that. And if you guys have any of those like resources, you can send them my way, and I'll make sure I get them to those who are asking about those resources. And for those who are attending live right now, we have some upcoming webinars. We have one that's on November 6th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Question like a historian, teach students how to ask questions that drive inquiry and spark action. And then we also have White House 101, exploring the People's House, which will be on November the 7th, also at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And I'm going to drop these links into the chat here, everyone, in case you want to register for those. And also, as we are, you know, doing additional webinars and program, always just check that webinar tab when you go to NCHE. Just check that, because we might be throwing up some amazing webinars that might pop up, so you can get some more wonderful insight like we received tonight. So, and there, yep, webinars are free and open to everyone. That's great. Free is what wonderful word. We rarely hear that in our society today, in this economy particularly. So free learning, community, it's amazing. So hope to see everybody at a future webinar. And thank you guys again for joining. Thanks to the panelists. And everybody have a good night.